this lecture, we will look at the encounter between Christianity and Islam during the medieval period. In the 7th century, emerging out of the Arabian Peninsula, Islamic armies swept through most of the erstwhile Christian lands, overrunning the whole of Syria, Palestine, Egypt, Persia, and northwest Africa. Thus, most Eastern Christians by the end of the 7th century were living under Muslim rule. The Muslim rulers did not always actively persecute their Christian subjects. In many cases, they were allowed to keep their faith. Even then, Christians found themselves under enormous pressure through various restrictions and impositions. There were prohibitions against sharing the Christian faith, building of churches, Christian parades, hanging of the cross in the churches, and so on. Christians were also defined as a zimmi, in Arabic meaning protected people, and were required to live in a particular part of the city. They were assigned a dress code. Christians were also imposed with a special kind of tax called jizya, which was much higher than what the Muslim subjects had to pay. All these and many more put tremendous pressure on Christians living under Muslim rule. As the years wore on, the political, social, and economic pressure imposed on the Christians took its toll on the Christian community. In the light of this, many Christians defected to Islam. Others, however, held firm, some even engaging in apologetic works. If the Saracens, as the Muslims were addressed then, say so-and-so, then say so-and-so. This was a formula repeatedly used by John of Damascus in his book Dialogue Between a Christian and a Saracen. The book was instructive for Christians to help answer difficult theological questions raised by Muslims. John was an 8th century Orthodox Christian at Damascus. He addressed the challenge of Islam, calling it as the Ismailite heresy. According to him, although Muhammad correctly combated idolatry, his teachings continue to keep people in error. John thus engaged in aggressive polemic of the Christian faith in his engagement with Islam. John's approach to the Muslim challenge was confrontational, characterized by open accusations and aggressive defense of the Christian faith. In contrast was the approach of the Nestorian patriarch, Timothy of Baghdad, who engaged in mutual dialogue with Muslims. Timothy was the patriarch of the Nestorian church and Persia. He famously engaged in a 2-day dialogue in 781 with Caliph al-Mahdi of Baghdad. Throughout the dialogue, both Timothy and al-Mahdi showed tremendous appreciation for each other and respect for the faith of each other. Islam and Christianity has a long history scarred by confrontation and violence. However, like a candle in the dark, there are also few instances of mutual dialogue between the devotees of the two faiths. The dialogue between Timothy and Caliph Mahdi is one of the earliest such engagements. John and Timothy are examples of early Christian engagement with Muslims. They represent two types of approaches, confrontational and dialogue, which Christians have adopted since its first encounter with Islam. By 669, Muslim forces were already at the gate of the Byzantium capital, Constantinople. The Byzantium was able to survive till the 15th century. Nevertheless, it was under constant threat from the Muslim forces. In desperation, in 1095, Byzantine Emperor Alexis I Comnenus appealed to the Christian West for help. The response of the West to this appeal is what is known as the Crusades. The Crusades refers to a series of intermittent military campaigns by Western Christians during the late medieval period. It was an attempt to win back the erstwhile Christian lands in and around the Holy Land from under Muslim control. The appeal from the East was received with overwhelming positivity from Western churches. Not only did they empathize with the sufferings of the Eastern Christians under Muslim rule, they also had memories of harassment and violence during their pilgrimage to Jerusalem. In an age when pilgrimage was considered as one of the highest goals of spirituality, the disruptions caused by the Muslim occupation of Jerusalem to the Christian pilgrims was an offense too difficult to ignore. They thought that the best was to have the Holy Land in Christian hands. It was in this line of thought that the crusade soon began to be seen as a pilgrimage. If it was a meritorious thing to make a pilgrimage to the Holy Land, much more would it be a pious act to rescue the sacred spot from the profanation of the infidels. This was the conviction that changed the pilgrim to a warrior. This idea of pilgrim warrior was rooted on Pope Urban's initial call for the crusade on 27 November 1094 at the Council of Clermont in France. Urban gave a very impassioned sermon in which he exclaimed, "When Jesus Christ summons you to his defense, let no base affection detain you in your homes." With this enthusiastic appeal, the vast assembly assembled at Clermont burst through every restraint. With one voice they cried, "God wills it! God wills it!" Thousands immediately affixed the cross to their garments as a pledge of their sacred engagement to go forth to the rescue of the Holy Land. The next year, in 1096, the first crusading army departed Europe. Altogether, 7 major crusades were conducted during 1096 to 1254. The Crusaders were able to achieve limited military success and established 4 Crusader states, the kingdoms of Jerusalem, Edessa, Antioch, and Tripoli. However, over the years, all the Crusader states fell one after another to the Muslim forces. Edessa in 1144, Antioch in 1268, Tripoli in 1289, and Jerusalem in 1291. Thus, at the end, about 200 years of military effort by Western Christians came to naught. Deep religiosity can very easily sway into realm of extremism. The crusade was one such act of religious extremism that left a deep scar in Christianity. It sowed seeds of hatred and scorn of Muslims toward Christians, and made it infinitely more difficult to reach out to Muslims.